Okay, so this is section 2.8. This is the last section that's actually going to appear on the midterm this Friday, okay? And the title is Solving for Any Given Variable. So we are used to solving equations kind of like this one right here. We have 2x minus 3 equals 7. Now let's just solve it just for old time's sakes to get a little practice. What do I do first? Add 3 to both sides. So I go plus 3 here, plus 3 over there. This cancels out. And then I rewrite everything. I have a 2x equaling 10 because 7 plus 3 is 10. And for my final step, what do I need to do to get rid of that multiplication of 2? Divide by 2. That's right, divide by 2. So this cancels. We get x equals 5, and we are done. Now what I want to do is compare that equation to this one. Kx minus y equals p. And let's again say solve for x. So a lot of people are going to get freaked out with this because there's no numbers. It's just a bunch of letters, but it's the same exact process, right? It all depends what they're telling you to solve for. Because over here we only had one variable, so solve for x is obvious. There's only one variable. You want to get that variable by itself on the left side of the equal sign. But over here we're telling you solve for x, but I could have said solve for y, or I could have said solve for k, or I could have said solve for p. Actually, this is already solved for p. If it would say solve for p, what does p equal? P equals k times x minus y. But right here they're telling us to solve for x, so it's the same exact process. I want to get x by itself. So x is like the movie star, k is like the movie star's buddy, the y is the bum at the corner. So we get rid of this guy first, right? The minus y I need to get rid of by doing what? Plus y. So that'll cancel it out, and what I do to one side I do to the other, plus y over here. Now could I actually add p plus y? No, if I had a y plus y, that would be 2y. I could do that. But p plus y, you can't do it. So we're just going to rewrite it. So let's rewrite our equation. I have the kx that just comes down, the equal sign that comes down, and the p plus y we cannot do. So I just rewrite it p plus y. And now I need to, again, go back to the x. I want to get x by itself. I do not want this k. And I'm not adding k, I'm not subtracting k. I'm actually multiplying k times x. So if I don't want that multiplication of k, I do the opposite, which is what? Dividing by k. So I'm going to divide by k, and what I do to one side, I do to the other. Now since neither of those terms on the other side are k, this is not a k, that's not a k, I'm going to divide the whole thing by k. I would have to divide the whole thing by k anyway, even if there was one of those being k. But anyways, you divided the whole thing by k. The k's cancel. And now we truly have x equaling p plus y, all divided by k. And that would be your answer to that equation, solving for x. So I guess the best way to prep for this is to just jump right into the homework, which is 2.8 WSP. And it's just an entire page of equations. And on each equation, they tell you what to solve for. So don't get confused. What does this mean? For r. That means solve for r. So here's r. You want to get r by itself. So since r is on the right side, you need to get r by itself on the right side. And it says r times t. So if you don't want that multiplication of t, you divide by t, right? So you divide by t. And we do to one side, do to the other, divide by t. And now you would have r by itself. Here's the equal sign. Here's r. Let me change those t's. Those look like plus signs. Let me change them to that. So r equals d divided by t. Could I divide d by t? No. So that's my answer. R equals d divided by t. And that's perfectly fine. Now there is one little detail that I'm not going to count if you forget to do this on the homework. But let's say the midterm exam, it's gonna give you an extra detail, and this is something that you have to write. You have to write that t cannot be 0. Okay? You have to write that t cannot be 0. Yes, this is your answer. Actually, let me write it with the r on the left side. R equals d over t, but t cannot be 0. Okay, and this is an important part of your solution. Why can t not be 0? Because if t were 0, you would have a divided by 0, which would make it undefined. Okay? So you just have to give that statement that t cannot be 0. If you have like a r down here, you would say r cannot be 0. If you had a k down here, k cannot be 0. Make sense? Cool. Now it is a little, like let's say, let me go off of the homework here. Let's say I had something like, let's say I was solving for r, and I had, let's say I got my final answer. My final answer was r equals k over 2t minus 6. Let's say k over 2t minus 6 is your answer for r. Then right here, you can't say that t cannot be 0, because if t were a 0, it would be 2 times 0, which is 0, and negative 6, and that could be a negative 6 in the denominator. What you want to avoid is the whole denominator becoming 0. So if you did have this as an answer, what you would want to do is make sure that your denominator is not 0. So I would actually write this on the side, right? 2t minus 6. We know it cannot be 0, because if it were 0, if that whole thing, 2t minus 6, were 0, it would mess up the whole answer. You can't have 0 in the denominator. So let's solve this thing. Of course, instead of an equal sign, there's a not equal to. So let's solve this thing the way we normally would. Plus 6, you would have 2t equaling, or not equaling 6. And then you would divide by 2. So t cannot be equal to 3. So let's say this was my answer, r equals k over 2t minus 6. You would need an additional part of your answer saying, but t cannot be 3. Now, why do I want to say that t cannot be 3? Because if t were actually 3, if you plug in 3, 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 minus 6 is 0, and we know that you cannot have a 0 in the denominator because that would make it undefined. Does that kind of make sense? Again, the whole purpose, I mean, solving's easy. You get the letter by itself on one side. To get rid of something, you do the opposite. What you do to one side, you do to the other. But once you get an answer, again, like let's say this were my answer, in addition to the answer, you want to make sure that the denominator doesn't end up being 0. So what's my denominator here? It's the whole thing, 2t minus 6. So on the side, you're going to write down 2t minus 6 cannot be 0. There it is. 2t minus 6 cannot be 0. And you work this out, and you solve for t, and it'll say t cannot be 3. Again, if t were 3, 2 times 3 is 6. 6 minus 6 is 0. You cannot have a 0 in the denominator. That'll make it undefined. So whatever answer you get, you need to make sure you state that the denominator cannot be 0. So like let's say I were solving for r. Okay, so let me move this out of the way. Let's say I were solving for r. R equals 3x minus 4 over 2. Let's say that were my answer for r, yeah? Would I need to state anything additional? No, because the denominator's 2. It'll never be 0, right? There's no variable down here, right? Now let's say I were solving for r, and I got this answer, but instead of a 2 down there, it was a 2y. Then I would say what? Yes, this is my answer, but y cannot be what? What would make this whole thing 0? If y were what? If y were 0, the whole thing would become 0. And you can't have 0 in the denominator. So you got to say y cannot be 0. So you got to add this onto your answer. Y cannot be 0. I mean, these are all just random examples I'm giving here. Let's say I'm solving an equation, and let's say let's say I'm solving for x, and I get x equals y over z minus 5. Okay, let's say x equals y over z minus 5. So let's say this were my answer. I also have to say but what? But z cannot be what? Would 0 make this whole thing 0? 0 minus 5? Yeah, z cannot be 5. Because if you have a 5 right here, 5 minus 5 is 0, and that would make it undefined. So you have to say, but 0 cannot be 5. Okay, so whatever answer you get, you have to throw in that extra but, if necessary. Okay, Let's actually get to some real problems here. So this is number 3 from our homework. We have the equation mx plus 4y equals 3t. And they're telling us to solve for x. So x is the movie star, m's the movie star's buddy. The 4y that's being added over here, that's a bum at the corner. What do I do to get rid of that? How do I get rid of a plus 4y? Minus 4y. Now you can't really divide by 4 because that won't get rid of the entire thing, right? So what you do to one side, you do to the other side, you're going to subtract 4y over here. So what do we have left? We have a m times x equaling, could I actually do 3t take away 4y? Those are not like terms, so I need to rewrite it. And I want to write it exactly the way it looks, 3t minus 4y. So I almost have x by itself. They're telling us to solve for x. Right here it says m times x. I don't want m times x, I just want x. So what do I need to do to get rid of that m? I need to divide it by m. And that'll get rid of it. M will cancel out with m. But of course, what I do to one side, I need to do to the other side, to the whole entire thing. Now you could say the whole thing divided by m, and that would be your answer. X equals 3t minus 4y all over m. Or you could also say x equals 3t minus 4y, and each of them divided by m. That's also a very acceptable answer. Either that one or this one, like with the m separate. Now, what is the extra detail I need to write right here? But what? M cannot be equal to 0. Why can't it be equal to 0? Because if you had a 0 right here, it would all become undefined, right? If you had a 0 down here, it would all become undefined. Or a 0 down here, it would all become undefined. So you have to throw in this additional statement that m cannot be 0. Okay, let's try another. So on this one, number 5, we're solving for b. So b is clearly on the left side of the equal sign. B is the movie star. A is the movie star's buddy. The plus 3c, that's the bum at the corner. Let's get rid of that guy. What do I do to get rid of the plus 3c? Subtract 3c. Of course, what I do to one side, I do to the other side. Subtract 3c. Now, if this were a 2c up here minus 3c, yeah, I could actually get a negative 1c, but it's a 2x. It's not a c, it's a 2x. So you can't really subtract these, so you're just going to rewrite it. So on the right side of the equal sign, you're going to have a 2x minus 3c. And on the left side, what do I have? AB. Now, what are we solving for, A or B? Solving for B. So let's get B by itself. That really says A times B. I don't want A times B. I just want B. So how do I get rid of that multiplication of B? I mean, the multiplication of A. Yeah, divide by A. That'll cancel it out. And what you do to one side, you do to the other. So you could say, I want to divide every single term by A. And that'll be your answer. Or you could just say the whole thing divided by A. So B equals 2x minus 3c, all divided by A. So either this answer right here, each one divided by A, or the whole thing divided by A. Both are perfectly fine. Now, what's our additional statement that we have to say? But what cannot equal what? A cannot equal 0. That's right. A cannot equal 0. So on number 7, we're solving for m. And m is on the left side of the equal sign. It's definitely not by itself. M's the movie star. 2/3 is the movie star's buddy. A is the bum at the corner. Okay, so we need to get rid of A first. So we're going to subtract A. It'll cancel out because A take away A 0. And of course, when you subtract A on the other side, you want to combine like terms. So you're not going to subtract A from the R. You're going to subtract A from the A. So you're going to put a minus A right here as well. And it also cancels out. A take away A is 0. No more A's. Okay. So what do we have left? We have a new equation that reads 2/3 m equals R. Now we need to solve for m. So here's m, and it's a fraction. So if you're confused with that fraction, simply multiply both sides by 3. That way the fraction disappears, and you will have just a 2m equaling 3r. 3 times r times 3 is 3r. And for my final step, you want to get m by itself, so you need to get rid of that multiplication of 2. You're going to divide by 2, divide by 2. So m equals 3r over 2. That's your answer. Or you could also say m equals 3 halves with the r on the side, 3 halves r. Either one's good. I'm going to leave it 3r over 2, but you could do 3 halves r. Now right here, there is no additional statement necessary because there is no variable down here. Like if there were an x down here, you would say, oh, but x cannot be 0. But that's the number 2, right? That's the number 2 down there. So you don't have to, there's no way that this answer could end up being undefined because there's a number in the denominator, not a variable. Let's try number 9. So on number 9, we're going to be solving for y. And y is clearly on the left side of the equal sign. It's definitely not by itself. Y is the movie star. 2/3 is the movie star's buddy. V is the bum at the corner. So let's get rid of that v by subtracting v. And what I do to one side, I do to the other side. I cannot subtract x take away v, so I'm just going to rewrite it. So I'm going to have the equal sign. I'm going to have x take away v on the right side. And on the left side, I bring down the 2/3 y. 2/3 y. Now, if you don't want a fraction, simply get rid of it by multiplying everything by the denominator 3. So you're going to multiply this by 3, the x by 3, and the v by 3, everything by 3. So if I multiply everything by 3, it will be 2y equaling 3x minus 3v. Now for my final step, I need to get rid of the multiplication of 2 right in front of the y by dividing by 2 and dividing this whole thing by 2. Now I could divide the 3x by 2 and the 3v by 2. In other words, I could take this divisor of 2 and split it to both first and second term. Or you could just leave it like that. Either way is fine. I would just leave it like that. So my final answer is y equals 3x minus 3v over 2. And again, you could split that denominator and say 3x divided by 2 and 3v divided by 2. So y could equal this as well. You could take, again, the denominator and split it to each of the two terms and have divided by 2 on each of them. Either one's totally fine. And once again, there is no denominator in the, there's no variable in the denominator. It's just the number 2 down there. So you don't have to say but x cannot be 0 or but v cannot be, there is no variable down there, so you're good. Number 9. Moving on to number 11. So on number 11, we have an equation that's already solved for h. And you want to solve for x. So x is clearly up here. It's definitely not by itself. There's a lot of junk all around the x. First of all, this divided by 5 has got to go. So how do you get rid of the divided by 5? By multiplying by 5. That way the 5's cancel. And what you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. So you need to multiply h also by 5. So let me rewrite my new equation that no longer has fractions in it. It's rx plus 9 equals 5h. And again, we are solving for x. So x is the movie star, r is the movie star's buddy, 9 is the bum at the corner that we want to get rid of. We don't care about that 9. So let's get rid of the plus 9 by doing the opposite, minus 9. What you do to one side, you do to the other side. The 9's cancel, but over here on this side, 5h take away 9, I can't really do that because the terms are not alike. So I can't subtract 9 from 5h, I just need to rewrite it. So on the left side, well, here's my equal sign. On the left side, I have the rx, the r times x. And on the right side, I have 5h minus 9. And again, we are solving for x, so I need to get rid of this multiplication of r by doing the opposite of multiplying, which is dividing by that r value. And I'm just going to put the whole thing over r. Now, you could put 5h divided by r minus the 9 divided by r. I'm just going to put the whole thing divided by r. So that's actually my answer right there. The r's cancel. X equals 5h minus 9, all divided by r. Again, you could split that division of r and say x equals 5h over r minus 9 over r. You could do that also. Now, in this case, we do have a r, a variable in the denominator, so we do want to state an additional part of our answer. We want to say but r cannot be 0, because if r were 0, so that's a part of your answer. If r were 0, then this whole fraction, this whole answer would be undefined. Or if r were 0 down here, then all of this would be undefined. So whenever you do solve for a certain variable and you get an answer that has a variable in the denominator, you want to make sure that that denominator cannot be 0. So you have to write r cannot be 0 in that case. Number 13. Right here on this one, we are solving for w. And where's the w at? The left side or the right side? What do you guys say? It's on both sides. It's right here and here. So w is on both sides. You definitely don't want w on both sides when you're solving for w. So you want to get w by itself on one side. What would you like to get rid of, the 2w or the 7w? Let's get rid of the 2w by doing the opposite of 2w, which is minus 2w. That'll cancel it out. What you do to one side, you must do to the other. And of course, you're not going to do it to the number 2. You're going to do it to the other w so you could actually subtract it. So you're going to subtract 2w over here. So 7w, take away 2w, that is 5w. We're going to rewrite everything, bring down the minus 2, bring down the equal sign, bring down the minus y. So we need to get w by itself on the right side now. It was on both sides. Now it's just over here on the right side. So let's get w by itself on the right side. W is the movie star's buddy. You don't want this guy. Let's get rid of this guy. So I get rid of the minus 2 by doing the opposite, plus 2. What I do to one side, I do to the other side, plus 2. I'm going to end up with negative y plus 2 equals 5 times w. And of course, you do not want 5 times. You just want w on the right side. So I need to get rid of that multiplication of 5 by dividing by 5. And what you do to one side, you do to the other side. And you could do it to each one. You could put a divided by 5 here and a divided by 5 there. Or you could just put the whole thing divided by 5. I'm going to put the whole thing divided by 5. So there's my answer. W equals negative y plus 2, all divided by 5. Of course, I would write it with the w on the left side. W equals negative y plus 2, all divided by 5. There is no variable in the denominator, so I don't have to state anything extra. I don't have to say, oh, that y can't be negative 3 or y can't be 0. That's it. That's my answer. And of course, you could split that division of 5. You could write it like this, negative y divided by 5 plus 2 divided by 5. If you wanted to, you could write your answer like that. Either one of those are perfectly fine. So we're done with all the odd questions on this worksheet. There should be another video uploaded shortly doing the even ones.